Good morning. Welcome to Connect Church. I'm Pastor Nate Robenstein, lead pastor, and I'm really glad you're here. And Kelly, as one who has had a lot of dental work done, yes, 500 miles is a long way. So there you go. Today we are ending our series, the Visible series that we've been talking about over the last 8 weeks or so. In this series, we've been taking a fresh look at Jesus through the perspective of the questions that he asks people. Our growth groups have ended, but many of you have had a great time in your growth groups, continuing the conversation from Sunday morning and looking at these questions. And we found those questions all in the book of John. It's been a great study. I've had great feedback from many of you. But today, we want to throw in sort of a bonus sermon. Quite honestly, what you're about to experience today was supposed to happen the first week of March at the beginning of our Visible series. But if you remember, that's the day we canceled because of snow. And so we decided to put this at the end as sort of a recap of the whole series. So it's a bit of a bonus sermon. Growth groups, we will not be talking about this in your time. And we're not going to be in the book of John either. We're going to be in the book of Mark. So if you have your Bibles and want to look to Mark chapter 5, it will be on the screen as well. But I'm going to just read through this and then make a few comments. But let's start in Mark chapter 5, and we'll start in verse 21. Remember, we're looking for a question that draws someone into a deeper story. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. And then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. And when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." In this story, we see Jesus, who was on his way to heal the son of a very important man. We need to catch that. He was on his way to heal the son of a very important man, but he stopped and interacted with a woman who others had long since disregarded. And by asking, "Who touched me?" he drew this desperate woman into his grand story of redemption. This morning, I've asked Kody Purcell to help us grasp the relevance of this story. Kody's the wife of our worship and discipleship pastor, Ben Purcell. She's the mother of Winnie, and she's a great friend to many of us. So I've asked her to share with us this morning. I believe she has some great insights into the story of the woman who was bleeding. And Kody will remind all of us that our stories can be drawn into the loving and redeeming story of Jesus. I will come back up when she's finished and share a little bit more. But for now, would you help me welcome Kody Purcell?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. As Pastor Nate said, I get to share two stories actually with you guys this morning about two women from two different time periods. One is from 1st century AD. The second one is from present day. So we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about our first woman, the woman with the issue of blood. Oh, it's beeping. Now, her story seems kind of inconsequential, doesn't it? She doesn't even get her own story. Like Pastor Nate just read from Scripture, Jesus is on his way to heal the daughter of an important official, gets touched, has interaction with this woman, continues on his way. It seems like a little blip, but this story has significant meaning. Now, when it comes to what we know about the woman, it's not a lot. We can use context clues, cultural norms of the time, scholarly insights, and some speculation. We know that she lives in Galilee. We know that she's Jewish. We don't know her specific age, but we know from the term used there, gune means woman or wife, that she's old enough to be someone's wife, but isn't quite elderly. We also know that she's completely alone. There's no mention of an attendant or a maid or anyone with her. No mention of anyone whatsoever. And we know that she's desperate. Why is she desperate? She's desperate because she's had this issue of blood for 12 years. Let's talk more about that a little bit, the issue of blood. Scholars believe that she had a chronic and abnormal condition called abnormal uterine bleeding. So basically, she has been menstruating nonstop for 12 years. Bleeding for such a significant time often leads to anemia, and those symptoms present as shortness of breath, fatigue, weakness, tingling and numbness in fingers and toes, headaches, depression, difficulty regulating body temperature, and poor concentration. So she's wrecked. She is physically suffering. She is exhausted. She is achy. She probably has a hard time even getting up and a hard time just thinking clearly. We know that they didn't have women's hygienic products like we have today back in 1st century AD, which means that she is probably spending all day toiling, washing cloths to help catch her blood flow. And because they didn't have running water, she probably wasn't able to thoroughly wash, which means a foul odor followed her wherever she went. Now, some of you are uncomfortable that I'm talking about menstruation. You're like wriggling in your seats. I totally get it. Imagine being this woman, though, where it's not just a taboo, impolite subject. It actually makes her ceremonially unclean. The Hebrew term nida means separation. That's the word they use for menstruation, separation. She had to be removed. Every woman, when they menstruate, had to be removed for 7 days from the time their cycle started. The thing is with her, she was never placed back. She was separate for 12 years. Every single thing she touched was unclean. Pick up a glass, unclean. Sit on a bed, unclean. Touch another person, they were unclean. And then whatever they touched was unclean. So she was someone that people didn't want to be around. In fact, people from the city, they had the right to pick up a stone and drive her away from them. She's unwanted. If she's coming down the street, you're probably going to cross to the other side of the street to avoid touching her or being around her. She hasn't been meaningfully touched in 12 years. Can you imagine that? Some of you might think, I don't like being touched. That sounds like a good thing. For 12 years, though. If she was married, her husband had grounds to divorce her. And because there's no mention of a husband, it's likely that he did. She is alone. And because she's unclean, she's also unable to engage in any religious ritual or ceremony. And the Jewish people do not commune with God like we do. You had to go to the temple. She wasn't allowed in the temple. So she's far from God. And we know from this passage that she spent every last penny on doctors to help her. And not only did that prove to be unfruitful, it actually made her condition worse. So she's physically suffering, she smells, she's lonely, she's far from God, and she is broke. That is why she is desperate. She feels hopelessly incurable. And then she hears about Jesus, and a little hope is ignited in her heart. She hears about all of these miracles that he has done. And she says, if I just touch the tassel on his cloak, I will be healed. And the tense used in Greek there leads me to believe that that's something she could have said to herself over and over. If I just touch the tassel, if I just touch him, I know I'm going to be healed. I just know it. And so this hope that has ignited in her makes her be a little risky because she wants to go and touch him. And it says he's in a crowd. And the Greek used The word used there for that crowd is not a nice, docile, pleasant crowd. The Greek word that is used means crushing, hemming in, pressing against him. So I imagine this probably very frail woman gets up, puts on her cloak, maybe even puts it over her head because she doesn't want to be recognized because she's the unclean woman, right? Goes into this crowd. She's willing to risk being pressed in and possibly trampled to touch him. Not only that, but if you're pressing into a crowd, you're touching people, right? Making them unclean, 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 unclean. She also wants to grab hold of Jesus. And in that day and age, a woman was forbidden from touching a man in public, but she's willing to risk that too, because she's got nothing left, right? Nothing left. So she does. She pushes through. She grabs hold of that tassel and immediately feels the blood flow stop. Immediately feels healed. She knows that she's healed. She probably doesn't feel that achiness. She's probably able to think clearly for the first time in 12 years. And it's this moment of elation. It's amazing. And then Jesus stops. And she's probably thinking, oh no, he stopped. And he asked, who touched me? His disciples are incredulous. They're like, Jesus, you're in a crowd. Everyone is touching you right now. What do you mean, who touched you? Everyone's touching you. But he asked again, no. Someone touched me. Who touched me? And he did this for her benefit. And she's scared. It says that she's trembling with fear. And she throws herself before Jesus. And she confesses everything. I was bleeding. I was sick for 12 years. I lost everything I have. But I touched you and I was healed. And she pauses and waits for his response. Is he going to be mad? Is he going to drive her away with stones? He doesn't, right? He's not mad. He says, your faith has healed you, right? No. He said something very, 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 very important before that statement. He called her daughter. He said, daughter, your faith has healed you. And in that moment, he made her someone. He claimed her. He showed her that she was someone who matters. He showed everyone in that community that she's no longer afflicted, so he restored her to society, and he healed her. And the word used here is sozo, which means redeemed. He healed her physically, and he spiritually redeemed her. Now, why does this story matter today? It matters because maybe you're hurting. Maybe you're desperate. Maybe you're bone-tired and hopeless. Maybe you're lonely, depressed, angry, confused, unwanted, grieving, sick, or ashamed. I want you to know that Jesus sees you. He has something to say to you. He wants to claim you. He wants to show that you matter, restore, heal, and redeem you. You may not think that's possible, and you may be wondering what that looks like today. So I would like to share another story about another woman who was suffering for years, and like this woman, she was bleeding, not physically but emotionally, from multiple wounds. I'd like to share my story with you, if that's okay. Now, before I dive in, my big disclaimer, I'm about to be really vulnerable here, and I'm about to share some really ugly things about my past and my family. So I need you to know something. First thing I need you to know is that I'm not sharing this to slander my parents or to bring any shame upon them. And I'm not sharing this so you judge them. I'm sharing it because it's a part of my story, and I want you to see the grace of God in my life. I felt some hesitation sharing because my mom has been here multiple times, my dad came once, and a part of me feels like if they come back, you're going to be like, oh, you're the person. You stink. They certainly did some horrible things that have had deep impact on my life, but I believe in a God of forgiveness. And I learned a while ago that I don't get to choose how people treat me. I get to choose the type of woman I'm going to be. I get to choose the type of daughter I'm going to be, and I'm going to be one that honors the Lord. And I'm going to share more about my relationship with my parents at the end of this, so just hang on with me, okay? Now, you communicate value by how you treat something, right? If you treasure something, you shelter it, you keep it safe, you take care of it. I can tell how important Ben, my husband's bicycle, is to him because he toils over it. He airs up tires, he greases the chain, he makes sure it stays out of the weather. If there's anything wrong with it, he asks other bike enthusiasts or mechanics, i.e. the Smelzers, for help because it's important to him. Likewise, one can tell how unimportant something is to someone when they neglect or mistreat something. Like the plant I left in his care when I visited my family in Texas. I know, it's a sad little thing, sad little dying plant. I came back, it was saggy, turning brown, because he forgot to water it. And the other plant pot that I had was gone because he knocked it off the counter and smashed it into 10,000 pieces. Clearly, my plants were not one of his priorities, right? The thing is that same message gets communicated to a child, doesn't it? A child learns their self-worth, their identity, and their personal boundaries in their home. If they are treated well, sheltered, loved, and taken care of, they have a higher sense of self-worth. They have a higher ability to function across home, school, and social settings, and they're able to establish appropriate boundaries and have successful emotional and social development. Adversely, if a child is mistreated, abused, neglected, and verbally torn down, they have a low sense of self-worth. They have a lower ability to function across home, school, and social settings, and they struggle when it comes to setting appropriate boundaries and often have issues with emotional and social development. From my earliest memories, seeds of lies began to be planted in my life. And over the course of my life, those seeds were watered and grew into barriers that honestly I sometimes still struggle with today. The lies that were planted were I am worthless, I am unimportant, I do not belong, I am defective, and I am all around just bad. I don't know how else to explain that. I felt like an unwanted stain on a priceless garment that people would want to scrub out. Did you know that by the age of 3, children have a concrete way of viewing themselves? For some kids, that is great news because they know they are loved and they know they're valuable. For others, like me, that is heartbreaking. When I heard that, I felt so sad. Because what do you think was conveyed to 3-year-old Kody when she woke up with her dad on top of her, shaking her so hard she had blood pouring out of her nose? What little 3-year-old Kody learned was that she must have done something bad to warrant that. That must have been her fault. What do you think 5-year-old Kody believed when she came home to an ambulance because her mom had attempted suicide? 5-year-old Kody thought, Mommy doesn't want to be with me anymore. Maybe if I was a good girl, Mommy would want me. What do you think 7-year-old Kody learned when Mom told her she didn't want her? Just go to your dad. Your daddy's little princess anyway. But the thing is, Dad was either beating her or ignoring her. That confirmed that lie, that no one wanted her, that she was unwanted. When I was 9 years old, my older sister Kylie and I got in a fight, and my dad hit my sister so hard on her head that her eardrum broke, and she had blood coming out of her ear. And I stood there just watching all this happen, and my mom came out and asked, "Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? Are you happy?" And I thought, no, this is my fault. I must be poison. No wonder no one wants me. I'm bad. When I was 10 years old, my best friend's dad took me into the bathroom and locked the door. Now, I'm not going to tell you what happened behind that door, but I'm going to tell you that I learned that day that my body wasn't my own, that I have no say over what happens to me. And the most heartbreaking part of that memory for me is that I thought, At least someone chose me. At least I was special to someone. When I was 12 years old, my dad left and never came back. That confirmed, again, that I am unwanted and bad, and if maybe I was good, he would have stayed. A month later, I turned 13, and from the time I was 13 to about 18-ish, it's fuzzy for me, my mom struggled with an addiction to narcotics. And her attempt to cope, she reached out for numbness that was given to her in a bottle of pills, and began this cycle of relapse and going to rehab and relapse and rehab, and that just confirmed over and over, I am unloved, I'm worthless. Now I know addiction is more than just not wanting to get better enough. I know it's a disease, but to 13-year-old me, it felt like mom just wanted pills instead of me. Now let's take a break from this for a second and talk about my faith through it all. I accepted Jesus as my Savior as a little girl, and I spent most of my time trying to get him to love me, most of my time trying to show him that I was someone who was worth loving and worth being with. And of course, God loved me this whole time, but I didn't know or quite understand that. I drew a picture once to illustrate my relationship with God, how I felt it was, and God was in one corner, faced away, wouldn't even look towards me, and I'm in the bottom part of the picture, curled up, and there's just darkness in between us. I was disgusting and unwanted, and it didn't surprise me that God wouldn't want me. And that was where I was at when I was about 19 years old in my relationship with God. I felt so worthless and so lonely, and I was in so much pain that I reached out, and instead of grabbing onto God, I grabbed a bottle of pills and I swallowed the entire content of that bottle. And I sat on my bed and waited as my belly digested them. My little sister came in a few minutes later and just hugged me, and she hadn't done that in a long time because I was struggling with depression so much, and I was just pushing everyone away. But for some reason, she felt compelled to come in and give me a hug. And I had a flashback to when I was about 7, hiding in the closet. My dad was beating my mom, and I think my older sister. And so my little sister and I were huddled in this closet, and I am holding her, and I tell her, I will never leave you. I will never leave you. I'll keep you safe. And I realized, I'm leaving her. I'm leaving her. This bottle of pills is being digested. So I went to the ER and I took charcoal. I did the whole thing. And after all of that, I decided to stop trying to get God to love me. I wasn't going to put forth the energy anymore. I wasn't going to try to prove that I'm someone worth loving. I was tired and broken and depressed and hopeless. And so I told God, okay, if you want to work in my life, go ahead. I got nothing left. I'm tired of trying to prove that I'm lovable or valuable. So here I am in all my hot mess. If you want me, you can have me. If you fail me, though, I will not fail on my next attempt to take my life. A few months later, I found this Christ-centered residential facility, and I went there, and it was a wonderful community of other women and believers, and it was there that I learned that God loved me. Like Christianity 101, God loves you. But I learned that he loves me. I was truly finally able to believe that. I learned that I matter, that he did not create me to be used or abused, that he delights in me, that he has a purpose for my life, that he calls me daughter, that when my father and mother forsake me, he will take care of me, that I don't have to fight anymore. He will fight on my behalf. I only need to be still, that he will never leave me or forsake me, that nothing can separate me from his love. No amount of sin or pain or shame can separate me. And he began a great work in healing many, many wounds that I frankly don't even have time to share every single wound I have had in my life. I'm just sharing these few blips in my life. There are many. And there is no darkness so dark or deep, or no pit so deep that God is not able to reach down and pull you out. Now, Psalm 27:13 says, I would have lost hope had I not seen the goodness of God in the land of the living. That's like I love that verse. And I repeat that to myself a lot. I would have lost hope had I not seen the goodness of God in the land of the living. So let me share a couple of my goodness of God moments in my life, or things in my life. The first thing is that I don't cope with my pain or hopelessness or depression or anything with alcohol and drugs. Statistically, when you are in a home where that is drug and alcohol use are rampant, that's what you go to. By the grace of God, I have broken that chain in my life and in my family's life. The second goodness of God in my life is my husband. When a woman is abused, she typically marries an abuser. My husband is a good man, and he loves me so much. I have never felt more safe than when I'm with him. If you don't know him, you're missing out. He's an incredible man, and he's a gift in my life. Third thing, I'm a mom, and I'm a good mom. I'm not perfect, but I thought I would never be able to be a good mom, or that something I somehow would be so messed up I wouldn't be able to love my child properly. By the grace of God, my daughter knows that she is loved by me, by my husband, and by God, and I pray that she will continue to grow up knowing that, so that when she's 3 years old and she has a concrete way of viewing herself, she will know that she is valuable and she is lovable. Now let's talk about my relationship with my parents. God began a work of forgiveness in my life. I am grateful that I am not bitter, I'm not resentful, I'm not living with that poison in my heart. I've forgiven my parents, and my mom and I, our relationship has been restored. It may not be a normal mother-daughter relationship, but I love my mom, and I know my mom loves me, and I'm grateful for the relationship that I have with her. My father, like I said, I have forgiven him. I'm not sure exactly what I want that relationship to look like. I don't know. There are going to obviously be certain boundaries just because of some of the things that I've lived through and some of the things that he's done in my life. But the fact that I'm open to relationship with him is only because of the grace of God. Only the grace of God did that. And I have freedom from depression. I have not attempted to take my life again, which is incredible. And that doesn't mean that I don't get depressed. I certainly do. But I remember that there is a light far greater than whatever darkness I'm facing. And I would love, love, love to tell you that I'm completely healed, that I reached out, I grabbed Jesus, boom, I'm healed, and I'm no longer bleeding. But that's not true. I still have many hurts from people, from life's events, but I know that God loves me, and I think back to those goodness of God moments so I don't lose hope, so I don't despair. I learned that my circumstances do not determine God's goodness. I don't know why he allowed what he did in my life. And I don't know why he allowed in your life either. But I know that he loves you. I know that he sees you. I know that he cares for you. And I beg you to reach out and grab hold of that tassel. Reach out and grab hold of him. He wants to claim you. He wants to show you that you matter. He wants to restore, heal, and redeem you. And it's possible. I'm going to pass this back to Pastor Nate, and the band's going to come up for a response time. I implore you to put your walls down, reach out, and grab hold of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Kody, and thank you for sharing with us. And I want you to keep in a mindset of listening to what the Spirit is speaking to your soul right now. Clearly, when Kody shares a story like that, it's emotional, But I want you to go beyond the emotions and ask yourself, what is the Spirit saying to me right now in this moment? I'm going to give you a chance to respond to what Kody has shared. And I want to preface this by saying your story is going to be different than hers, right? Everyone has a different story. And perhaps we're tempted to think that, well, my story's not as dramatic or not as deep or whatever. But you know what? We all have hurts in our life. We all have brokenness in our life. We all need a touch from Jesus. It could be for a variety of reasons. So her story may not match up with yours, but all of us need to be like that woman, right? Who, when Jesus comes by, reach out. And so the phrase "when Jesus comes by" is what the gospel is. He came down so he could come by, right? He came down from heaven so he could come by, and then we have this opportunity to reach out and touch him. And so this morning we're going to give you a chance to do that. We're going to sing a couple of songs. And we're going to I'm going to ask you to take a risk, like the woman who got past all of the issues that would keep her from Jesus. And like Kody, who got past all the things that would keep her from Jesus and found that moment in her life where she reached out and reached out for Jesus. And we're going to sing a couple of songs, and we're just going to invite you to come and just stand here, kind of make this area, this space up here, a bit of an altar. Just stand here. And if you come up here, we have some people that are going to come and just pray with you. They're not going to interrupt what you're doing. They may ask how they can pray out loud, or they may just put their hand on your shoulder and just say, I want to pray with you and for you. And I'm going to ask some of you that if God's speaking to you, to just come up here. Now, I know some of you are praying for other people and you're interceding for them, and that's great, but that's not what this moment is about. This is about you just saying, I'm coming here because I want to have that courage. I want to take that risk. I want to reach out and touch Jesus as he touched me. There's not going to be a group prayer time. It's just during these songs, I invite you to come pray. So why don't you stand? Let's reach out to the one who's walking by, and let's come to Jesus.